As 2023 draws to a close and next year's high-stakes elections are barreling towards us, the American people will have to contend with many major questions, including, for example, whether we'll allow Republican elected officials to force death on women with life-threatening pregnancies, or whether we'll allow MAGA cultists to gleefully destroy democracy in order to install their openly fascistic cult leader as dictator. But compelling questions about abortion rights and democracy aside, conventional wisdom and history and polling show us that there is one issue above all others which matters most to Americans, and we can't afford to ignore it, and that's the economy. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. All right, folks, we have several clips to play, but before I play them, I just want to again begin with a disclaimer, as we often do when we talk about the economy. We're going to be talking about statistical trends and macroeconomic data, which are factual. They are there. They are legitimate. We can't ignore them. We will not ignore them. But it doesn't account for every instance. It doesn't account for every person's situation on an individual basis. So there are thousands or perhaps even millions of Americans who are experiencing legitimate financial hardship. And I don't want to diminish that, okay? But we have to reconcile these things. We have to reconcile these instances and the perception and the feeling about the economy with the macroeconomic trends and the facts and the figures about the economy, especially because it's going to play a huge role in next year's elections, again, whether we like it or not. So with that in mind, let's play some clips and we'll unpack them together.
Are you bullish or bearish on the economy for 2024?
On paper, the U.S. economy actually looks pretty great. Not only the inflation numbers that you mentioned. Inflation has been coming down, obviously. It's still not where we want it to be, but it's doing much better. Employment has been doing better than anyone expected. Many people expected, professional forecasters expected that we would have had a recession by now, and we have escaped that, fortunately, so far. And in fact, not only are the numbers better than people expected a few months ago, they're even better on many dimensions than had been forecast before the pandemic began. Like if you look at the Congressional Budget Office's expectations for where employment would be, for where GDP would be right now, we have blown those numbers away.
That's important to note. What's funny is it's even being reported, as we've discussed, on Fox News. They go out of their way not to give President Biden or the Democrats any credit, but even they, in various situations, have talked about the strength of the American economy under the president.
Because a lot of us feel like there is a lot of good economic news. Manufacturing jobs in my home state of Ohio booming right now because of policies that the Biden administration put into place.
Then you have people like Marie Harn who are willing to do that, and Jessica Tarlov, but they are radically outnumbered. Most people try to avoid mentioning Biden by name. But the point is that the news is spreading. Brian Butler, Butler, who is a political commentator, he and others have used the phrase vibe session to talk about how people feel about the economy when it seemingly conflicts, again, with the macroeconomic data and statistical trends. So he said this on Twitter, and I thought it was interesting. He goes, how many months or quarters of improving sentiment do we need for a vibe session to be officially over? And he's talking about a recent Bloomberg report, which says U.S. consumer confidence rose in December by the most since early 2021 as Americans grew more upbeat about the labor market and inflation outlook. And the vibe session thing has really stuck with me because if you look at the data, if you look at polling, again, we've talked about this in previous videos, like people like Fox News and conservatives and MAGA cultists, they will appeal to the polls. They're like, the American people feel really bad about the economy. And again, notwithstanding legitimate economic concerns, the polling does seem wildly incongruent with the data. But if you look at it, it's like very much the case where people are like, well, my personal finances are okay, but I still think the economy is bad. The economy for other people is bad. Other people's finances are bad. There's an incongruence. And I think much of that is due to the reporting, right? And the constant feedback loop between the reporting and the sentiments and the feelings, and also the fact that Democrats have just not been very persuasive or effective or constant in terms of bragging about what they've accomplished, either because they see that it's crude or insensitive to those who are still suffering. I'm not exactly sure. But President Biden was recently asked about it, particularly, again, as they head into 2024. And he gave a funny, blunt, and painfully honest answer.
About the economy, sir, what's your outlook on the economy next year?
All good. Take a look. Start reporting it the right way.
All good. Take a look. Start reporting it the right way. Now, I think all good's a bit of a stretch. Again, there are a lot of people still experiencing hardship, but for the most part, That's true. It is mostly good. Take a look. And if you do take a look, it is mostly good. You'll see that it is. And people should start talking about it the right way, particularly professional reporters and journalists, people like the mainstream media. And I've complained about that for months, more than months, probably even a year. But we're actually starting to see progress. This was from an article in the Washington Post. We're not going to read the whole thing, but the top line is, everyone expected a recession. The Fed, Federal Reserve, and the White House found a way out. So we're going to read a couple of paragraphs here. So yet the economy is ending the year in a remarkably better position than almost anyone on Wall Street or in mainstream economics had predicted, having bested just about all expectations time and again. Inflation dropped to 3.1% from a peak of 9.1%. The unemployment rate is at a hot 3.7%, and the economy grew at a healthy clip in the most recent quarter. The Fed is probably finished hiking interest rates and is eyeing cuts next year, which would reduce interest rates in a big way, thank God, hopefully. Financial markets are at or near all-time highs, and the S&P 500 could hit a new record this week too. Fresh data from the Conference Board also showed consumer confidence, which we just discussed, reaching a 5-month high in December thanks to growing optimism for incomes, the job market, and overall business conditions. The strength and stability, defying even many of the most optimistic predictions, represents a remarkable development after seemingly endless economic crises that started with the 2020 coronavirus pandemic and continued through an inflation spike that the bank and the White House were slow to recognize. The Fed and the White House fought inflation on their own distinct tracks using entirely different tools. But now the central bankers, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and President Biden's economic brain trust are cautiously pointing out that they've been vindicated by data and developments dismissed as virtually impossible until quite recently. This month, Biden's typically staid Treasury Secretary, again Janet Yellen, gave an unusually direct rebuke, telling reporters that economists who had predicted that lower inflation would require widespread layoffs were now, quote, eating their words, quote. Call it the most polite revenge tour Washington has ever seen. Again, I guess we can't afford to be too arrogant, but the data is clear. The data has been clear, and people have been slow to talk about it. Now, we talk about having the facts on our side, and as Democrats, as people on the left, we very often, almost always, do have the facts on our side. But as I've mentioned, facts only take you so far. Ben Shapiro says, facts don't care about your feelings, gang. But feelings actually do matter more than facts, whether we like it or not, right? Because people act and vote based on what they feel. So having the facts is not enough. You actually have to persuasively convey the facts. And so I want to play some clips, recent clips from a MSNBC commentator, Chris Hayes, because I think he does a really good job of emphasizing this, almost like he's reading my mind.
But just take a second right now, okay, to consider what the alternate reality would be like in this moment after this turbulence under a Donald Trump presidency. My strong belief is that part of the reason that people's perception the economy was good in the Trump era, that Trump would be good at managing the economy, is that he constantly, unceasingly sledgehammered us over the head with propaganda about it day after day after day. The economy under his leadership was the greatest of all time.
We have the best economy, greatest economy we've ever had. We have the greatest economy that we've ever had in the history of our country. We have the greatest economy anywhere in the world. We built the greatest economy in the history of the world. We have the greatest economy on earth, not even close.
By the way, that wasn't true, just to be clear. I mean, depending on how you even think of the metrics. But even worse, amidst the tumult, the scariest, toughest days of the pandemic, when Donald Trump was president, let's remember, okay? Didn't stop in 2019. He was president in 2020. During those worst days, when we were staring down the barrel of a mass death event that was going to kill more than 1 million Americans, Donald Trump was focused on that economic propaganda, not even the economy, economic propaganda.
So he's right. The messaging was consistent. It was brutal. It was unending. And it came from not only the sitting president at the time and Republican leaders, so, one of two major political parties saying it in unison, but you also had media figures. You had Fox News, the biggest, most popular news network in mainstream news. You had alternate media like Ben Shapiro, The Daily Wire, Steven Crowder, Tim Pool, and others also shouting it from the rooftops. That is formidable. That is a turnkey, synchronized media operation. And Democrats don't have that. But worse, we don't even have the inclination to brag about the stuff that Democrats and the president have accomplished. And so I want to play you one final clip in which Democrats and the president are kind of encouraged to do just that.
What I think is happening, Chris, is there is this struggle within progressive circles, and it's driving me absolutely insane because Republicans, as you showed, do not have this same conversation. It is, well, people don't feel like the economy is good, so we can't talk about the economy. And I absolutely want to scream because Republicans don't have that problem, Chris. The economy is, people aren't going to feel it unless we're actually telling them and showing them, right? We do have to declare that it's morning in America and that things are good, are getting better, and we have to go out there and start selling it and promoting it. We can't just sit back and wait for people to start feeling it, or it's going to be too late.
Absolutely true. And we talked about this too in previous videos, which is that people who have sour opinions about the economy, according to polling, when you tell them about things that the Biden administration has pushed for or successfully passed by way of their slim majorities in Congress, their opinions flip, right? Because again, facts don't speak for themselves. It's not enough to do a thing. You have to be in people's faces constantly, using every possible combination of word and tone to convey the message, especially with our attention spans now, especially with most Americans doing other things like working and with families and friends, et cetera, and so forth. We have to be unrelenting and multifaceted conveying the facts. And the clock is ticking. Again, 2024 is right around the corner, and the outlook, at least when it comes to polling on the economy for Democrats, is not great. This was actually, I guess, some kind of good news in the sense that it was bad news for Republicans, and since it's a zero-sum game heading into 2024, that's good for Democrats. This is from Navigator Research. While those who disapprove of Biden's handling of the economy cite inflation and prices, those who disapprove of congressional Republicans' handling of the economy emphasize taxes, rich, and other concepts related to tax fairness and wealth inequality. Well, the upshot is, at least at the current trends, prices and inflation should be getting better over the next year. But Republicans will always try to be, shifting the tax burden or making the tax burden even more on middle and lower income households and families and individuals in order to, create lucrative tax cuts for the rich. So the problems that Republicans experience with the economy are evergreen because they'll never change their tax policy. But again, the point is this. We have the facts. The facts are not enough. We have to persuasively convey the facts to everybody else. And we've got about 10 months to do it. Okay. The clock is ticking. Let's get on it. Let me know what you think in the comments.